All right, so last year we talked a lot about our fixed route cost structure. So this year I want to talk more about our Go Durham Access paratransit system. So Access provides a critical transportation service that enables riders with disabilities to access work, education, and healthcare destinations. During the pandemic, when we faced staffing shortages, our on-time performance suffered, with riders facing major delays as well as lengthy trips. We heard from our riders, our community, and our city council that we needed to improve. So we took steps to incentivize recruitment, on-time performance, and customer satisfaction. And as you can see here from our FY 2025 performance, we're seeing the results of that focus. And we're back. All right, so we made performance and accountability central to our procurement of a new contract to begin in 2025, with strong penalties and rewards built into the contract. Through the competitive process, the highest ranked firm was the incumbent, We Drive You. The resulting contract, with additional safeguards to ensure service quality and safety, exceeded our budget. Through that process, the contractor committed to access operator pay increases in 2025, 2026, and 2027. And so when we awarded that contract, we brought a budget amendment to council that was approved in October of last year. So that's a major contributor to the financial picture changes that we've seen over the course of this year. As shown here, our ADA ridership declined by more than 40% during the pandemic, but has been steadily rising since 2021. What we've heard from our riders is that now that the service is more reliable and more efficient, they use it more often. This chart shows the impact of the pandemic on our average cost per trip. Our contract covers fixed costs for things like accounting, insurance, and federal compliance, and other functions that do not change as ridership fluctuates. As we continued to pay all these fixed costs in 2021, but ridership had dropped by 40% from 2019 levels, causing a large increase in average cost per trip. While ridership increases help to bring down average trip costs in the subsequent years, the costs of service provision, primarily personnel, have continued to grow, and the higher cost structure of the new contract is evident in FY 2026. Just as personnel costs drive service costs, wage rates drive personnel costs. Under previous and current labor agreements, wages are scheduled to grow by 48% from the 2021 baseline. During this time, there has not been a corresponding increase in the city property tax rate for transit, which was held to the revenue neutral rate last year. Unlike with our fixed route services, where we receive nearly 40% of cost reimbursement from the Durham County Transit Plan, for ADA paratransit, the amount currently eligible for reimbursement from Durham County is only 6%. This means that the portion of our budget with the largest growth in recent years must be paid almost entirely with city funds. The transit financial model on the next slide makes a series of assumptions consistent with the current budget: that the service remains fare-free, that growth in fixed route service levels is fully supported by the Durham County Transit Plan, and that federal formula funding remains available with modest growth. The major contributors to expenses are the expected growth in contract costs per hour for fixed route bus and access paratransit services. Additionally, there are increases in the fund's contributions for indirect costs to cover support from budget finance, the city attorney's office, and other city departments. Here we can see the impact of increasing costs while revenues are not keeping up. While last year we expected to finish FY 2026 with a positive fund balance, with the access contract award structure, increasing access ridership, and the costs of major repairs for buses, we now forecast a negative fund balance at the end of FY 2026. In the out years, you can see on the net line near the bottom, the difference between revenues and expenditures grows from an $8 million deficit in FY 2027 to nearly $12 million in 2030. So our starting point for FY 2027 is a model that shows a fund balance in the red to the tune of more than $10 million. Listed here is a set of policy options that could be used to reduce this shortfall. First up would be to reduce eligibility for Go Durham access. This one requires some historical perspective. When the federal government enacted the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, in 1990, it included provisions to require federally funded public transportation agencies to provide specialized transportation to enable people with disabilities to travel to and from places that could be reached using traditional fixed route systems of buses, subways, or trains. This parallel system, designed to complement fixed route services while accommodating disability needs, is known as complementary ADA paratransit, designed to serve the same areas served by fixed route with an allowance for 3/4 of a mile walking distance around the bus or train stop. In practice, there is a 3-part test. If a person has a qualifying disability that makes them eligible for complementary ADA paratransit, that's part 1. Their trip begins within 3/4 of a mile of any bus stop, that's part 2. And that trip ends within 3/4 of a mile of another bus stop, part 3. That rider is entitled to complementary ADA paratransit services. At around the same time as the ADA was enacted, in 1991, the city of Durham assumed the operation of the local bus system from Duke Power, naming it Durham Area Transit Authority, DATA, and forming a board of directors for DATA to govern the system. As ADA came into effect in 1992 and transit systems were required to become compliant by 1997, the DATA board set up DATA Access as a complementary ADA paratransit system. At some point, the DATA board determined that DATA Access should exceed the 3/4 mile radius requirement and be available to all City of Durham residents with a qualifying disability. Despite governance changes over the years, that policy has remained in place. Our analysis shows that trips outside the 3/4 mile radius make up 16% of city-funded ADA paratransit trips, with an associated cost of $1.35 million. If the city were to restrict eligibility to the federal requirement, that would result in $1.35 million in annual savings to the city transit fund. Moving down the list, the city could discontinue the use of off-duty Durham Police Department officers who provide security at Durham Station and respond to calls across the system. This would result in $1.2 million in annual savings. For context, I'm looking at you, Chief Andrews. In September 2024, when we were unable to get consistent DPD officer coverage, we shifted to the use of private security personnel. During this time, we saw a significant increase in safety and security incidents at Durham Station. And after 2 months, and with the assistance of Chief Andrews, and then Deputy City Manager Ferguson, we were able to return to having DPD officers providing security services. The next item on the list, we participate in a regional call center that responds to approximately 115,000 customer inquiries each year. For context, that's about 80% of the call volume that Durham One Call handles. The cost of that call center is $350,000 annually. We are working to explore technology that could reduce these costs, but we have not identified a cost-effective solution implementable in FY 2027. Were we to discontinue this service, customers would be able to get information about bus stop locations, trip planning, and real-time arrival information from Google Maps, the transit app, and other services. Next up, when the city took over the bus system from Duke Power, the city took on funding of the private pension system for bus operators and other transit employees, a pension system still in place today. Private sector pension systems are required to carry insurance provided by the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation, PBGC. Public sector pension plans are not required to have PBGC insurance, for which we pay $150,000 annually. If the city of Durham were to declare sponsorship of the transit pension and make it a public sector pension plan rather than a private sector pension plan, this would result in an estimated $150,000 in annual savings. With respect to fare policy, as we move down the slide, you can see Go Durham is fare free. We have it on our water bottles. The council has been very clear about the desire to remain fare free. However, as a reminder, at last year's budget retreat, we discussed a proposal to return to fare collection while increasing the base fare from $1 to $2, which would generate $4.8 million in fare revenue. The city currently receives almost $400,000 in annual support from the Durham County Transit Plan for fare free, for which we are most grateful. Staff submitted a request to increase this support by $2.2 million in the FY 2027 Durham Transit Work Program. However, that request has not advanced. Right. For fare free.
That's a subset of a larger amount.
Correct. That's specific to support fare free for low income riders. 87% of our riders report incomes below $35,000 a year.
Just 400,000.
Correct. Do you want to
talk more about the request and how that process works, or is that something that we're going to get to?
So every year there's an annual budget process for Durham County Transit Plan funding. So we submit all of our services that we have been operating, any new services like the 4 and the 9 that we will be operating for a full year going into 2027, and then other requests. And then the tax district, Go Triangle manages the tax district, runs a model that looks at available funding and then other commitments that have been made through the adopted 2023 Durham County Transit Plan. So when that model was run and all of those commitments were plugged in, future projects, both operating and capital, the growth from cost increases, what it determined was that there was very little capacity in the financial model for additional new initiatives. And so there were a few things that could be accommodated, but a request of $2.2 million every year for the foreseeable future would have put the model into a negative balance.
Thank you, Director Egan. So when we transitioned to fare free, were there institutional dollars that we lost as well in that process? And what did those equal to at the time?
So we collected GoPass revenues from Duke University, Durham Tech, North Carolina Central University, Durham County, and the total amount was about $300,000 annually.
And I know you're raising again this recommendation from last year about returning to a minimum fare collection. Have other cities done, and have we have explored other models such as like optional pay, having systems in place for riders to choose to pay? And have we modeled what that could bring in that sort of scenario where you still had a base level of 0, but you could collect some revenue from ridership?
So there are some systems that use a pay what you can model. What we've found is that if you were accepting, for example, cash contributions, the cost of meeting all of our financial controls and cash management requirements would likely exceed the cost of actually revenues collecting. There are other models where you scan a QR code and you can donate to a system through that. We have not explored a model like that in depth.
Yeah, or like tap to pay. It's like we've
Again,
come a long way in the last couple of years too, in terms of cashless payment, right?
With tap to pay, we would be incurring significant technology and equipment costs for tap to pay. The way that we arrived at the $400,000 that we received from Durham County was essentially to add up the cost of what the county transit plan would have been paying for fare collection equipment, technology, youth Go Pass, and other passes that were supported by the Durham County Transit Plan. So that $400,000 essentially represents money that would have gone to the cost of fare collection. So since that cost is avoided by going fare free, we asked for those funds to be allocated to fare free support.
Thank you. That's one of the questions I know I had when we've had these conversations about do we return to fare free or not. I know that one of the things is the tech that would need to be added to even collect fares. And then, it's Go Raleigh and Go Triangle have returned to fares. And the analysis that was done was that their ridership was very different than our ridership, and that most of the folks who are boarding qualify for one of our carve outs anyway. And so that we wouldn't be, that we weren't going to generate the revenue that maybe some of these other fixed route transit systems were going to generate.
So the primary source of revenue for Go Raleigh, where close to 75% of their riders are eligible for the low income pass, is they receive reimbursement for those trips through the Wake Transit plan. For the low income trips. So the Wake Transit plan contributes about $3.3 million annually to Go Raleigh to compensate Go Raleigh for the cost of those free low-income trips.
So they have a really good working relationship with their county transit.
They do.
Good morning. Okay. Am I? Okay.
They have more money too, so to be fair.
Okay, I have just a couple questions about that, and then I want to go back to a couple of other things that we talked about. I just tapped it. It's still not on? I really,
Yep.
Awful. Okay. Okay, so y'all submitted this request, and can you tell me how much it was? And then was it denied outright, or was there any, or we have the ability to submit a request for a different amount? Like, how does this process work?
So we submitted it, so it'd be $2.2 million every year. So that they calculate it through 2040. So, 35 million over that 15-year period. All of those costs are modeled. The tax district has to show that it's fiscally constrained, that it has a balanced budget. So we submitted that in the fall. In January, Durham County staff provided a presentation to the Board of County Commissioners where they showed all of the requests and the different types of requests that have been received from the project sponsors. And the direction that they got from the Board of County Commissioners was to decline those requests based on the funding availability in the model and other commitments.
Okay, so the direction was to decline the request that we made. Is there any ability to amend the request, or once the request is in, is it done?
I'm going to address that in a minute. We've got some slides after this where we'll talk about where we go from here. So.
Okay, I think that my next questions probably are going to be in there as well. I just want one clarifying question. Is the off-duty DPD officers, is that only at the downtown station?
It is downtown station, but they also respond to calls. So if there's an incident on a bus on a route, it gets dispatched. They radio it in, and then a police officer will report out to that incident location, either if the bus is stopped because of the incident, or to a time point on that route where the police can address the actors involved.
Okay, and then the contract for the Go Durham access, obviously I saw that it was much more than we were expecting. Can you just give me a brief understanding of like what is included in that contract and why we are unable to do it in-house, or like what the difference in expenditure is?
So one of the big aspects of the commitment that the city made when we took over transit services from Duke Power was that we made a commitment to the federal government that we would respect the right of transit workers to collectively bargain for pay, benefits, work rules. So the folks who drive the buses, the folks who drive the access vans are members of labor unions, and they collectively bargain for their wages and benefits and work rules. So in the state of North Carolina, it is against the law for municipalities to collectively bargain with workers. So the structure that we have in place allows the workers to bargain with the contractor. So the city hires the contractor, and then the contractor bargains with the labor union.
Thanks, Director Regan. First question is on the customer call center. Is that just for access, or is that for
all Go Durham services, access and fixed route?
And it's a relatively small number. Can you say what the impact might be on customer service?
So there's 115,000 inquiries a year. 10,000 a month, more or less, people calling in to ask, where's my closest bus stop if I wanted to get from this location to that location. So, a lot of these services are available with the kind of tools that I talked about, like Google Maps and the transit app, but a lot of Durham residents with the digital divide aren't comfortable using electronic tools, and they're much more comfortable making a phone call.
Okay. Second question is on the city sponsorship of transit pension, right? That's also a relatively small number. Why haven't we already done that? If it would save us money, it's not going to impact the pension plans of the workers, right?
Right. So we've looked at it. There were some compliance issues that we had to address with the pension plans. Those have been addressed through the Internal Revenue Service over the last few years. And so we We wanted to wait until all of those issues were addressed, and we wanted to find an opportunity to really kind of think through that whole discussion. So that process is still underway, but we're in a much stronger position compliance-wise now than we were just a few years ago with the pension system.
Gotcha. And then the last question is just to confirm. So right now, the county transit tax is a half penny, right?
Half of 1% of every purchase in Durham County goes to that sales tax.
And that generates how much a year, roughly?
It generates a little over 40 million a year. Revenues from other sources like vehicle registration fees bring that up to about $45 million a year. And then interest income, investment income that's earned on balances in the fund brings in another 7 million. So about 52 million.
A year that goes into the transit fund. Okay. Because I know we're talking about, like Charlotte has gone to like a penny, right?
Right. They've
And
doubled it.
Right.
with
And
their
we'd love to do
referendum.
that. I think it's difficult if there's like a large balance as we've talked about in the county transit fund. So that's just looking down the road in terms of our ambitions for transit, which are large. I think if we have a transit fund in terms of, we need to be good stewardships of our public dollars, right? And if those dollars are just growing and not being spent, it's hard to make the case for a larger transit investment. So
the presentation made to the Board of County Commissioners in January showed a $207 million fund balance in the Durham County Transit Fund, but then broke down how that will be allocated in future years.
what those allocations look like in terms of local transit buses, BRT even.
So
Or actually, keep the separate. BRT is probably a separate thing, but like bus service.
About 50 million a year is held in a financial reserve. Another about 50 million is allocated to major capital projects like Durham Station, like the bus stop improvement program, bus expansion, bus purchases. And then there's another about 50 million that funds both services and additional capital investments. So we're seeing close to 20 million of that is going into our services in future years annually. So that leaves about 50 million for future investments.
So their model says 20 million annually from the transit fund going into, say that again?
Go Durham services.
And that's buses, it's sort of infrastructure maintenance as well as, yeah.
Is this not working?
Be good to know more about that, what that exactly pays for.
Yeah, so it's next year, it's about 16 million for fixed route services, growing out to a little over 19 million for fixed route. And then for other supports, things like some of our like micro transit, the Go Durham Connect program, our senior shuttle, those the 400,000 for fare free, that's shown in the in that second line, other transit plan revenue.
So there's a 16 million investment right this year from the transit fund, but it's only a very tiny portion of supporting fare free is what you're saying. Of the 16, it's like 400,000 out of like 16 million.
400 out of that 3.5 that you see on the second.
Oh, that's
line.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So that the top line is tied directly to service hours. So hours on Route 5, hours on.
Yeah, right. And then 3.5 is the other, that's
other things like micro transit, Go Durham Connect, fare free.
So that in total, the transit fund is contributing like 19 and a half, almost 20 million. Yeah, okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So I'm going to hand it over to the city manager at this point.
We agreed that when it got to the really ugly conversations, I wouldn't make Sean stand in front of you. That'll be me. So if you wanted, so last year we did not propose a tax increase. I am not standing in front of you today to propose a tax increase, but I wanted to show you if we simply kept all assumptions the same and closed the gap with the tax rate, this is what this shows. For next year, it would be a 1.16 penny tax rate to generate 8.2 million. And in subsequent years, 0.06, 0.14, 0.18, and 0.15. Based on the current projections, that's what this would look like. Again, this is not a recommendation. Obviously, it is one option that the council could consider. We have previously talked about not doing a tax rate increase this year, so I know this is not something anybody wants to do. So let's talk about what you could do. I have said before many times, it is my job to not make your decisions easy, but to at least make them clear. So I think these are your 4 options, and some combination of these 4 things are the things that I think we need to do to bring this fund into balance. We either could raise taxes. This service has one source of revenue from the city, and that is the tax rate. We have no other revenues that go into this fund. So when there is a shortfall, you could consider raising taxes to close that gap. Second option, which is kind of obvious, is you could raise taxes less and include some or more than a few of the options Sean put on the screen. We reviewed those options. We all recognize that there are some really unpalatable things on that list. None of us like to do any of those things, but in service to trying to reduce the financial strain, we could consider some of those things. The third is we could try and close that $10.9 million gap, was it? 10.1 by finding $10.1 million somewhere else in the general fund. The general fund tax is essentially the same tax source. We just divide it up. So you could say no new taxes, completely fund this fund and find that money somewhere else. I don't think I have to tell you guys, since we already have a $9 million gap that we started off with 2 weeks ago, that would not be easy, but that would not be impossible. That would just mean really, really hard decisions. Final bullet is to solicit more revenue from the Durham County Transit Tax. So before we discuss these options and that option in particular, I actually going to go ahead a slide and come back to one. Anything we do, I want to suggest we do it as a one-year strategy. I think we have a short-term problem and a long-term problem. We do not currently have a sustainable model or a sustainable financial structure for this transit fund going forward. You have service level expectations for our community that far outstrip our revenue sources. And yet, as has been the subject of the discussion for the last 15 or 20 minutes, there are substantial revenue sources available to support transit that you do not have control over. So before you struggle with what to do this year, I want to cover this slide and say, I believe we need a really difficult but very clear conversation, not just with the county commission, but with Go Triangle and Triangle West, who are the 3 parties to the Durham County Transit Plan. Because what became very clear to me as we began to struggle with this is we have all the decisions to make about service and they have all the money. And you do not have unlimited resources. They do not have unlimited resources, but you have a plan and an idea for a transit service that is inconsistent with their plan and idea for a transit revenue. And that is simply a super complicated and unnecessarily complicated problem for us to try and figure out in this room, which is what we're about to do. My proposal to all of you is that we use next year to convene these partners and to make some challenging decisions with other leaders about where this service lives, who gets to make decisions about the service levels, and where the money comes from. And I think having a very open and honest conversation with the goal of simplifying and solidifying the future of this fund is necessary and important, because I do not think what you are doing this year is very practical. I will note something you guys leaned in on earlier, which really jumped out at me. A normal city council, like Sean was not y'all are normal, by the way, but other city councils have the option, albeit very distasteful, to decide we're going to cut service by 15 or 20% to close this gap. You guys don't have that option, and that's crazy to me. It's crazy to me that for all of these departments who might have a budget shortfall, one of the things we always force them to do is, can you spend less? I know you don't want to, but can you? As we demonstrated, you have a formula right now where you can cut service and you will not save a dime of city taxpayer revenue. That is fundamentally problematic. I'm not saying you would if you could, but the fact that I can't put that option in front of you, that when we have to show you cuts, it's all this other stuff. You don't see reduced hours, reduced service. That is fundamentally a governance problem for you and for us, because I don't feel like we get to give you very good options. So my pitch to you is, we have a one-year problem and a long-term opportunity to create better balance and less drama in future years, less conflict between you and the county commission, both of whom I believe strongly want good transit, but have different visions of how to get there. So that's my suggestion. And with that, I want to come back to this slide and talk about that fourth bullet. At your, yes, Mayor Pro Tem. Okay. At your direction and with your consent, we have had senior level discussions with our counterparts at the county that have been very respectful and I think very true to our governing bodies. We have asked the county for more money from this fund, and we have made strong arguments, as Sean has helped us build very strong arguments showing what other counties do and how other governments have collaborated on this. Our counterparts have been really receptive to those conversations, but they come back to something which I would want to give voice to you, which is they have an adopted plan. Regardless of the priorities of those plans being consistent or inconsistent with your values, they believe that the plan that they are one of three parties to, bless you, is an adopted policy document that is governed by three governing bodies, Go Triangle, Triangle West, and the County Commission, and that plan as adopted does not allow for them to just free up money for operations. So they have not kicked us out of the room, but they've said, we have this plan and we can't violate the plan. So when I put this fourth option up there, I am not saying, I wouldn't put it up here if I thought it was impossible. I think the county understands we're in this predicament. I think they know we're probably not done talking to them about it, but I don't want to make it sound like they just have a bank account that they can write. They certainly don't want you to think they have a bank account and they can just write a check. But as it stands today, I think a fourth option would be have some sort of very intensive process over the next weeks or months to see if they would participate in some collection of options. So now with that, that's mostly how I wanted to frame this out. And while you do not have to make final decisions today, either in this conversation or later today, we can revisit this in the budget guidelines. If you want a little time to think about it or talk over lunch, either at the end of this presentation or at the end of the day, some thoughts about what you want us to consider would be helpful. Mayor.
Thank you, Bo. Can you please go to the next slide? So I just want to name some things for colleagues. I am currently the chair of the TPO. I will be the chair for the next 2 years. And the mayor sits on the Go Triangle board. So as far as where we have representation on other boards that adopt transit plans, I'm quite frankly not super worried about that. If it needs to be an exercise to, a compliance exercise so the county feels better, that's fine. There's leadership on both those boards to have those conversations. I will say, having participated at our TPO meeting on Tuesday, we are already talking about a governance study at the TPO. I participated in the last governance study, and I just want folks to really understand the fundamental difference between how Wake County collects and administers its fund. There's a lot more municipalities in Wake County, and how, quite frankly, Durham and to a lesser extent, Orange County do it. It is a very different philosophical approach. And that matters right now. So we are going to be entering these conversations on governance. I'll say this, Mayor Schul wanted to merge transit 5 years ago during the light rail. Why do we have two transportation departments? Like, it doesn't make any sense. So these are not new conversations. We just keep circling and maybe hopefully we'll get it right this time. I don't know. I will say I don't have a ton of confidence. Because of sometimes lack of political will, lack of vision, I don't know. But these are not new issues. They're longstanding issues. Earlier councils have faced them. It's a constant tension point. So I just want to share that little bit of history. I will say that as the chair, that does put the city of Durham in a good spot as far as having hard conversations, as far as negotiating things that need to be negotiated. And my pledge to my colleagues and the city of Durham is I'm happy to have whatever conversation I need to have. With the options that we have, and I know everyone has, I do understand that there's some hard decisions. On the fare free part, we have had conversations that we maybe wouldn't be able to keep fare free forever. That has not been something that there haven't at least been some conversations around. I know there's been conversations on if we get to BRT, that is a much higher level of service and infrastructure costs to get that. And so could that really be maintained at fare free? Probably not, right? So we know that this is a conversation and a cliff. I will just say in this moment, when we have so many people are getting nailed right now, their SNAP benefits are getting cut. They're paying more for healthcare. We heard it loud and clear in our community conversations about how many folks rely. It seems pretty heartless, quite frankly, to then be like, and we're going to nail you on having to pay for bus service. When we know most of the ridership in Durham already don't have enough. They didn't have enough 5 years ago, and now they have even less. So I'm not saying fare free forever. I understand that the model is the model, but I do believe we have to figure out, even if it's for 1 year, some kind of option of a mix of, do we look elsewhere in the general fund for cuts? What can we really get from our county partners? Maybe there's some cuts that we can do on some of the smaller items. It doesn't get us a lot, but I have a huge issue in this moment with what people are facing financially to then also add fares back into their lives. So that's where I'm at. I'm going to go to Councilmember Burris and then Councilmember Rist.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Can you hear me?
Yep.
I don't want to
swallow it.
Ew. Oh, no. Okay. So thank you so much for your remarks, because I do also think about the economic environment we're in and what it means to our constituents to impose more financial burdens on them. But I did have a question. So if we did return to fares, would we have the same, and forgive me if you already covered this, would we have the same low income ridership? Would it be reimbursed by the transit fund as well, like in Wake County, or how would that work out if we had those same carve outs?
So when when Go Triangle returned to fares, they worked out an agreement with Durham County Transit Plan where Durham County pays about $1 for the cost of every low income trip that's made on Go Triangle. So because ridership on Go Triangle in Durham is much lower than Go Durham's ridership, it was a relatively modest financial impact for the Durham County Transit Plan. If that same dollar per trip were to be, per low income trip were to be applied for Go Durham, you'd be talking about close to $6 million of annual impact. So that would put the county's financial model into a negative balance because of the magnitude of that. So what we asked for was about 35 cents per low income trip rather than the dollar per low income trip that's being provided to Go Triangle Today by Durham County Transit Plan.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And I just want to express also that I know it's gonna be some tough decisions made, and you've successfully stressed me out before noon, so thank you for that. But I do have concerns. I just wanted about some of the safety components, because I know that there are some bus stops in like Wellens Village in particular, where people are deeply concerned about the safety. They're just the people who are stationary at the stop throughout the day. So I don't want to, as we have ridership and also our paratransit, if we see ridership levels that are increasing, I don't want to like stop momentum on that. So I am willing to explore conversations to try to make sure, particularly around the ADA community, they have access. So I don't know if it means looking further into some of the, I don't even want to say it out loud. Just thinking about, sorry, I'm going back to my notes in it, some of the federal requirements and some of the cuts around that, but just like, can we get a little bit more details about the ridership impact if we did cut those folks who are within that, what's it, 3/4 mile of the bus stop as well? And can you restate the percentage of folks who actually use the complimentary paratransit? I think you gave a stat out for that, around the folks who actually, the 3-part test, but the people who in the federal component of it.
So it's about 16% of our riders, of our trips.
Right. No, those 16%.
So 1 out of 6
1 out of 6 for that
is out,
complimentary.
doesn't meet some part of that 3-part test.
All right, thank you so much.
Swallow.
Stay up here, Sean. We'll have fun together.
So I want to thank the manager for raising the issue of governance. And I want to put I want to underscore the comments that Mayor Pro Tem Caballero mentioned. So I think, well, I don't know, Mr. Egan, if you were on the call, we had the TPO call. So we had talked about this very explicitly at our last meeting. We have every year or periodically, we have an MOU that we negotiate with our partners in the Triangle West TPO. We also have a federal funds policy that regulates how much of the total dollars the TPO gets we can get in Durham. It's been a constant source of sort of friction here in Durham, because we have about like 70% or more of the environmental or economic justice like residents in the whole TPO, yet we're capped on how much we can get total from the TPO for transit projects. So it's been an ongoing sort of tension there. So we started a conversation about what would it look like if we simply merged TPO and Campo? Because the reality is we have periodic meetings with the TPO and Campo. The truth is I've been on council for 2 years. I've been on the TPO. I think I've met twice with Campo. So that in effect, from my perspective, there's very little regional collaboration going on. I think we have to be clear that if we were to merge, which I think makes a lot of sense, we would now be we'd be the smaller fish in a bigger pond. I think that's okay. I think I'm happy with that. I think we've all been to other communities that have seen them build light rail and BRT while we struggle to get our first BRT line. I think we're better off in a larger regional concept because we are a regional economy. But I know there's different opinions about that, whether we'd be, overcome by Raleigh, the big fish or whatever. But I think this is a really important conversation to have. I think especially as we get towards the next census. So that's why we're going to start a governance committee to talk about this, because I think it's really an important conversation, because I think there's a lot of different players, and as you said, structural things that make it hard for us to like properly address the service needs we have in Durham. So I think that larger conversation is really important. I do feel like where we are now with fare free is just pulling the rug out from our residents and saying, okay, we're going to start charging in. I'm not comfortable with that. So I want to find a way that we can sort of thread the needle here on this one.
For process sake, I want to go ahead and put a pin in. I think the long-term conversation is necessary. So just for time today, hearing from you about the options you would or won't consider for next year would be really helpful as we close this section out to move to parking, because we still got parking to talk about. Yay.
Thank you. Could you just give us, I know it's not on this slide and you've given it to us several times, but can you break down the ridership for us by economic background?
So on our fixed route bus system, the big buses, we conduct onboard surveys. We ask people questions about demographics. And what we found in our last survey was that 87% of bus riders report a household income below $35,000 per year.
Thanks. Yeah, I know that that number hovers around there. It's good to have an updated one. I'm gonna echo what my colleagues have said about this. We don't have the option of differentiating among our taxes. And so this is one of those places where we actually can sort of fix the system. And so I'm looking at options 3 and 4 here, sort of in tandem. I think both of the, like, I think the continued conversation is important. I do not feel willing to have fares, particularly given this ridership number, because this is our, like, one of our sole ways of actually like moving money around to have equity in how we spend and how we tax. So I'm pretty set on fare free, especially if we're just looking for the next year. I would rather find some money to move in to keep it fare free, as opposed to thinking about something where we like do fares for a year and then revert. That doesn't make any sense to me. And I think we will lose all of the progress that we're making in terms of ridership and trust. I am curious about one thing, which is that we talked about, I understand that there's the 37%, 34%, 37%.
That's the county pays for in fiscal 27. We estimate that the county will sponsor 37% of the service hours.
So
For
is that, we've increased our service hours though, because we have increased some of our lines, right?
so any increase above that baseline of 177,000 hours,
We've had to pay for with our,
no, it's been eligible. Is yours working? That one. So every service increase that we've done in the last 10 years has increased our total system service hours above the blue bar. So all of those service increases, frequency, additional hours per day, new routes, all of those have been eligible for reimbursement from the Durham County Transit Plan through that green bar.
okay, so okay, that was my question. Thank you for answering that. And then, yeah, one more question. Oh yeah, and I kind of want to echo what Mayor Pro Tem was just saying, but some of these cuts, like eliminating the customer call center, like I understand why we've put that up there, but to me, I'm like, it's not really going to save us that much money. And it is like part of the service that I think is really useful. And so like that is not super interesting to me. I also feel like, yeah, the cuts within the department, I understand the ask. I'm sure the ask was like, manager was like, look within the department and I'll look outside of the department. We'll like come together with like lots of options. I understand that. And I think that y'all did a good job of looking internally, especially given our restrictions. I don't feel like super excited about any of these options. Obviously, the most monetarily efficient one is is aligning our ADA compliance with the federal restrictions. So that would be the only one that I'm like even remotely interested in looking at. And even that one, of course, feels bad. I'm not like saying that it's a great option, but these others being so small and also like being so necessary for the running of our bus program, I don't see that there is need to cut. I mean, yeah, the transit pension maybe, but I mean, it's just not going to do much for us. And so that's kind of what I'm thinking about within there. And that's why the option number 2 on our options for balancing doesn't like really feel super tempting. So those are my thoughts. Thanks.
So I appreciate, I know Councilmember Kopak and then Councilmember Baker both, I think, have their hands up, and then Councilmember Rist, we'll go back to you. Can we go back to the slide? I guess what I'm having a hard time, not that slide, the one, yes. So I think what would be helpful is, obviously the off-duty, the 2 items at the top are the ones where we're going to get any real juice, quite frankly. And it's hard to really, and I know y'all are tired, it's hard to make decisions when there could be places where it makes sense to not necessarily have off-duty DPD officers anymore. It's gotten more secure, some of the problems that we were seeing. And then to Councilmember Burris's point, there's some other places where we really need to maintain that presence. And so I think what would be helpful is both for 1 and 2, who are we looking at? It's hard to look at this 1.35 or $1.3 million number and also being like, quite frankly, with ADA things, I don't want to give a council in the future a lawsuit because of how we determine things. And so those 2 numbers are the biggest numbers, but there may need to be some more analysis that it lowers it, because we make some decisions that we're like, look, we're not comfortable with an across the board, no more off-duty DPD officers. We understand that there's some areas that really need that. So that's one thing I want us to have a better understanding. And then going back to the ridership, can we come back with a number? Okay, if we are going to do fares, right? I'm having a hard time. Most of those folks that you're saying already qualify for fare free, right? So are we really going to get the 4.8? Because we offer bus passes to anyone 21 and under. Is it 21 and under or 24 and under? I can't remember. We offer bus passes to seniors. And then folks who make a less income, we also offer them bus passes. So what is that number actually? And so that's what would be helpful for me to arrive to a decision. I think at the end of the day, it's going to be a mix of things. We all know we're in a minute of like really struggling. So that's just where I'm at. Thank you.
Just to be clear on this
Kopak.
list, you guys aren't making this decision today. We put it up for discussion. We're hearing the discussion. This all is very helpful. So yes, you don't have all the information you need. If my proposed budget includes any of these, I will call that out. I will use that time to explain to you more of the information you would want, and then you can make a final decision. But you're doing great. So I understand you don't have all the information you need to make these decisions. Giving us your high-level feedback is very, very helpful at this point.
Yeah, thank you, Director Egan, Mr. Manager. So definitely want to echo the comments of my colleagues. I'll start off by saying that I really would welcome the governance discussion. So I appreciate both of your insight where you sit on those boards and with the mayor as well. Mr. Manager, if you have a 1-year proposal, I would welcome that too, of how we.
That's my 1-year proposal.
Yeah, of how to get to the next year where we have time to address some of those governance issues where either we're able to access more revenue from Durham County, or at least we have more control over our system to make decisions about places to save money. So I appreciate you highlighting that. And I think that's really part of the long-term solution. I agree that fare free is really critical. I think in all times, in particular at this time, especially for the residents who are most likely benefiting or who are most benefiting from that. And I agree with Councilmember Cook that this is one of the clearest ways that we can help support our low-income residents who are the greatest users and riders of the system. I also have heartburn about some of the choices that have been raised, but I appreciate you surfacing those because I think we have to see those. And would be interested to see like on the margins, like are there potential savings on off-duty support if we have seen fewer incidents due to fare free, reducing any issues around fares, right, on service. But I wouldn't want to do that in any way that would jeopardize residents or operators who are experiencing clear safety issues. And so, it isn't a recommendation, but I think it would be interesting to see if there's something on the margins there. And also better understand what would be the impacts of kind of changing the formula about distance from transit. But I also don't have a clear interest in wanting to reduce the access for our ADA residents who are using that service. I think for me, there's a broader budgeting question, and I appreciate the last budget retreat, this budget retreat, the conversations that are still to come. This is my first time going through this process, but just seeing this in context of the overall budget and just trying to get a better understanding of once we see kind of the full picture, to what extent can $100,000 decisions add up? Can $1 million decisions add up? And today we're seeing the transit fund, the parking fund, seeing the gaps that exist there. Do we have a process to where I know you were doing this, but are we seeing options as a council? Those difficult choices in all of our departments, surfacing what are those $1 million options? What are those $100,000 options? where we can think about, if we are going to find reductions in other general fund sources, how do we understand from the folks who are closest to the work what those are, and then how to weigh those decisions against maintaining everything we want in transit and not having to go back and ask residents to fund this through property taxes. So I think just better understanding that and really surfacing those sorts of options across all of our departments to give us those choices to really have to weigh in a difficult way, I think would be helpful for me. And maybe that's still coming. Once again, this is my first time kind of working through this process. So thank you for kind of giving us these major bites, right? At maybe these have some of the biggest budget implications we're going to face, but helping understand how these add up and what our choices really are. So thank you.
I'll be quick because I know we're over time. For me, returning to fairs is a non-negotiable, and I think I'm echoing a lot of my colleagues here. That makes this a challenge for you all. As Councilmember Kopak pointed out, this is our first tough conversation. So if we look at something that's like $150,000, it sounds like a very small amount, but if we're trying to close a big gap, we might need to pick a lot of different little things that are $150,000 or $100,000. So we don't have that full picture just yet today. So as far as these options for balancing the fund in fiscal year 27, I'd almost want to return to that, this conversation later in the day, because I want to see what the rest of our budget situation is looking like before providing a clearer direction there. That being said, looking at it now, I am open in some form to all of these options, but I want to see what the rest of the presentation is today. Obviously, option number 4 would be wonderful for us. And I also think that we really need to have some conversations with Duke University. Yale pays New Haven $25 million a year. I think that we need to have some serious conversations with Duke University starting this year. Thank you.
All right. So I'm sorry.
And just on that last point, I mean, you talked about the $300,000 we used to get in institutional support. And I think it'd be worth having that as an option too, going back to those partners, Duke University being the main one and others, to understand based on the benefit that they're seeing to the constituents they serve. Is there more that they should be contributing to help support this and other services?
I'll be brief as well. Yeah. So I think you're hearing on the council's strong support for Fair Free. I also think, we haven't talked about this a lot, but I think this community supports Fair Free as well. I think there's strong support across our residents. But if you look at the numbers there, like what Chief showed us on the previous slide, was that even with $2 million from the county, which is what we've asked for, it sounds like, still a $4.8 million, we're still a gap there, right? I think we can ask the county for more. I think that's a tough negotiation. But I think those are hard conversations, obviously, right? So I think the answer probably is somewhere in the middle of all this stuff, like most negotiations are. I think if we can find some cost savings, great. I think if we go to the county and ask for more than just 2.1, I think they're going to want to see what we're doing on our end. And that may mean, so maybe there's a slight, tax increase of 25 cents or something like that. So like a small one, a modest one that shows the county that we're serious about this, but also strengthens our negotiations with them. So I think to me, it's kind of a little bit of all the above there we got to look at.
So we will revisit this at the end of the day, but I'm going to try and capture what I have heard, and you are going to be rigorously honest and disagree if I say something wrong. There is no support to make any change on Fair Free. We will take Fair Free as an assumption going forward. You today have not ruled. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I think what would it be helpful is that analysis around if we were to return to Fair Free, what percentage of the riders would be Fair Free anyway, right? Yeah, I'm sorry. If we were to return to fairs, who qualifies for Fair Free and what is that dollar amount?
Be happy to provide. I took that as a request for more information, but not necessarily that in balancing the budget for this fund that you want us to really look at that. We will provide that information if that changes your mind or changes our mind. We'll have that honest conversation. But for now, that will not be an assumption. I did not hear a lot of discussion of raising taxes other than the last final comment. I did not hear anyone take that completely off the table. I suspect it is very distasteful for most of you, but I did not hear you say absolutely not. If,
At least for me, it would be like the last recourse. I don't know if that's where everybody else is, but it's like, give me all the other options before you get to that option.
heard. And then.
It's a contextual, because I feel like we're seeing it here in the context of the fund. Raising taxes specifically tied to the fund is a way to bring the fund balance to health. But that, is something I think we need to consider, but that isn't also kind of the overall picture of when we're looking at everything we're doing across the city.
No.
Right?
But that is the
Just
third bullet,
within.
right? Bringing more revenue to the fund without raising the tax rate means taking that revenue from other parts of the general fund, which you have also said you are open to us exploring. The answer to your question, we can revisit at the end, Councilmember Kopak, is I seek council direction from areas you'd like us to look at, only because, so the part about can we find a little bit here and a little bit there? I think the major factor, the answer is yes, we can, and the but is this: most of your budget is personnel. Most of what drives that third bullet is paying salaries, huge investments that the council and your predecessors have made. And so there are very few options to save money that feel discretionary. They are jobs and people providing services. And so I don't want to leave you with the notion that, well, there's this fund program that we're doing that's great, but we could cut it to do this. Yes, that also is probably a position running that program or a salary raise. So much of the resources that are out there that feel like a lot of money to pull from are pretty tied up. We can take that money. It is really helpful to hear from the council, this is an area we feel like we could de-emphasize. I'm not asking you to do that here in this space, but over the next few weeks, if you want to confidentially talk to me about that, and we can use the leadership team to explore some of those areas, it's helpful to hear from you, because otherwise it really is a needle in a haystack exercise. And without knowing the council's priorities, all of those things feel important. We believe we're doing because council directed us to do it. So hearing from council, we remove that directive, we'd like to explore the savings, is really helpful to get those conversations started. So I think it's a dialogue. Finally, I heard strong interest in bullet 4. I expected that. I will ask that I will partner with you. I think our elected officials need to lead that charge. So I think we will need to build a really effective argument, give you some options, and then I will ask, working through the mayor, to coordinate some group of city council members who will help us enter dialogue with the county about this. Okay.
There's been some conversations around that already happening. So
Yes. And I would want to say, on behalf of DCM Probst, who has met with Deputy County Manager Maurice Jones, and myself, who met with Claudia this week, they have been very professional and very open to these conversations. They feel constrained. So I want to at least say that, professionally speaking, I'm been very pleased with this dialogue. I know it's not resolved yet, and I think we can continue it. Thank you all. This has been really helpful. We're going to go really quickly through parking, and I'm going to do the first slide, which is to say this: same problem, less discussion, and this is why. In December, we gave you an update from the parking fund. And at the end of that discussion, you all essentially, we didn't frame it this way for you, but you essentially said the same thing that we just said on this slide, which is we are open to some disruptive thinking in this fund because it is not self-sustaining and it's not going in the right direction. We heard you say we're not sure if we want this to be considered a revenue balancing fund versus a tax supported fund. We heard you say, we're not sure we want all these lots. We're open to redeveloping some of these lots. So we think essentially, or what I'm trying to say, you said, is you are open to this kind of discussion about parking going forward because this fund is not self-supporting. The reason why we're feeling a lot of stress in the transit fund that we absolutely have to struggle with now is because this ending balance goes bad, stays bad, and does not have any options they're going to come around the corner to help get us on the right track. We have equally concerning projections in the parking fund, but we have major assets in the parking fund that you just told us might be available to change. So we're not asking you to do really hard balancing in the fund this year, but we want to be really direct about the fact that this fund does not pay for itself. And this balance is going negative. This going negative is problematic in the same way that the transit fund is, but has more options to fix later. So the bottom line up front is we're going to probably bring you a proposed budget that has a negative balance in this fund, but we're not panicking as much about it. We still think we have hard decisions to make. One of the things you've directed us to do, and you'll be seeing shortly, is to develop a fair discount program for downtown customers. That will make this fund go worse. And all of that money still comes from the same place. It comes from that general fund. So we believe an off-cycle deep dive in this fund is forthcoming, but we're not going to make you sweat it as hard this morning unless you want to. And with that, Sean, I'm going to let you take it back over and finish this out.
Yeah, I'll move quickly through. So as we look ahead to the next budget year, we expect to maintain current revenues, but do not expect growth as our rates are near the top end of the market and no rate increases are currently proposed. As I said earlier, the model assumes no change in rates, hours, or days, no property dispositions or reductions in forces. Indirect costs paid to other city departments are projected at a little over $1 million annually. On the bright side, we were able to secure funding for parking deck rehabilitation through the general CIP process. So those costs do not need to be paid out of the parking fund, and those improvements are underway, and you should be seeing that across our facilities. So our multi-year shows a structural deficit in the $2 to $2.5 million range, driven primarily by debt service payments for the Morgan Rigsby deck. With negative fund balances shown in red, we are effectively borrowing from other enterprise funds until we can get back into the black. And then these are some of the options that the manager has discussed.
Does anyone have any questions about parking?
So you're basically saying,
Go back one slide.
Sorry, just two clickers.
I'm basically saying you can tell us to do the first three if you want to, but if not, we understand 4 is an option in this fund that was not in the other option, which is it could operate in the negative for another year while we figure out a better strategy for this going forward.
So how does that impact the budget though? Because it's already negative fund balance, right? So we're
This, unlike the transit fund, is an enterprise fund, so it has a revenue source, which is the fares or the rates that are charged. So it operates in a negative. It means that it is borrowing from some of our other enterprise funds, namely water or some of our more richer funds. So I think it's something that kind of sits. I won't get too far out of my league. Our finance director is here if we have further questions, but it sits essentially on our balance sheet. And so
as enterprise funds, we can cover
so
some of the other
from
enterprise funds for
others.
now.
For now,
while we think about the longer strategy.
Yeah, it's not a long-term solution, but it is short-term. It has been, and so we have enough other enterprise funds that are in the positive.
Right, and I'll name. I've said this before. I'll name again that we're pushing hard on transit, right? Fare free. And yet we're sort of dealing with these parking decks. At some point, we got to think about what's the balance between parking and transit, right? And maybe we need less parking downtown.
Thank you. This is a longstanding problem. We raised rates a few years ago, didn't really the thing didn't get that much better, even though it did a little bit. But I think when we get to a point where we're doing a study, I would like to see what other cities have done. That's a lot of high quality land downtown. What have other cities done to really maximize that land? And, you know, some of the parking lots are a lot older than others. So I know staff will be creative and helpful, and yeah, we'll figure it out.
Just as a follow-up, so with option 4, with that also, if we allow more space and time to study it for the next year, you all will also try to create alignment with what's been outlined in the downtown 2035 plan, because I believe that we did have some conversation around reutilizing some of the surface parking lots and reimagine what those spaces could look like. So I just want to confirm that will be also included in that. Okay.
Sorry to bring this up, but we also did just talk about running a pilot for the parking. Is that?
That's coming forward.
Okay, and it's still, this is,
Yep, it'll make it worse.
that's why I'm asking. Yeah, I mean, I'm asking if that is included in the projections that we're seeing today, I guess. No, it's not. Cool.
You will see that presentation before my proposed budget. So the financials that come back after my proposed budget, if you ask us to. We didn't want to make a presumption. You guys have said you want to see a proposal, so we didn't bake that into the fund. You will see that. You know, Sean, when are we bringing that? Or Gina?
April.
You're going to see that in April. You'll get a chance to respond to it. My budget will either include that or not include it based on what the council decides.
Okay, do you want to say that into the microphone?
Yes. In April, we will be responding to direction that council gave us at the December work session where parking was discussed. Council expressed support for staff working in conjunction with DDI to develop some form of parking discount program for first hour downtown to be free, to try and encourage downtown parking. We have been working over the last few months to develop that proposal. We're going to bring that proposal to council in April. If you decide based on that you'd like to move forward, we will recalculate the fund, and in my proposed budget, you will see the impact of that fare proposal, revenue proposal.
Yeah, thank you for helping us understand the distinction between the two and offering option 4 as a realistic option here going forward, and how it works with the enterprise fund and the venture funds. Just in terms of, kind of directionally where we're heading. So helping me to think about, it not just being a fund that is bad and getting worse, like we're seeing with transit. Obviously we're doing this pilot, and if we made that decision, it would make this look worse. But we've talked about potentially moving away from having surface lots downtown. And so not having those lots, not having those spaces, does that help to then decrease the negative over time? And then you talked about those being assets. Does that then allow us to bring in additional new revenue for the city, which may not be reflected in this fund, but it helps to support the general fund? Is that how I should be thinking about the potential for the long-term trajectory?
So long-term, we'd look at a range of options, and there are smarter people in the room than me to flesh those out. But some of what I'm making potential reference to there is selling those assets could pay off debt in those funds. So selling a parking lot for $500,000 could reduce the $500,000 debt. Other options could include transforming this from an enterprise fund into a general fund supported. You could basically decide the revenue will never pay for parking, but we will be willing to support this from taxpayers because we think parking is a public service, or because our downtown merchants want us to do that. So again, some of those may be terrible options. They may be great options, but we will bring you sort of the range of, you could charge more, you could get one-time infusions of cash into the fund by selling assets. You could create some new revenue stream, which I haven't thought of yet, but we would actually look at what are people doing in the world of parking, or we could change the way we finance this fund altogether and make it tax supported, which right now it's not, but it's getting close to being there.
On the issue of assets and debt. So as I look at the numbers, so fully 1/3 of our costs for parking is like debt service, right? So it's a big load right now on
Yes.
the total budget, right?
Yes.
But that's not for older service lot. That's for like newer decks, right? So I mean, like what's included in that 3 million we're paying a year? Like what are we still paying off on?
And I may need our finance director, but I believe that it is the new deck. So it's the Morgan Rigsby deck that
It's
is
just that one deck.
and
So that's
Tim can
2.5.
confirm 2.5.
It's the Morgan Rigsby deck. And then there's legacy debt that's about $500,000 a year. And we actually get support from the debt service fund for the legacy debt. So that's the 515, 828 that you see in transfer from debt service fund. But the bulk of it, 2.5 of the 3 is from Morgan Rigsby.
Morgan Rigsby, yeah. And so, as you said, potentially like selling off assets to lower the debt is one option. Is there any option to like restructure that somehow? I don't know if that's a possibility, because that clearly that one deck and that debt service is like a big chunk of what's happening here.
I'd like to table that question until we do the
Okay.
deep dive, but I think all of those will be on the table. I would also, and Gina, correct me if I'm wrong, or Christina, we help this fund out from time to time from the general fund. Right now, we're doing a fairly significant capital project on repairs and maintenance in the garages, and that is out of the capital fund, correct? Or is that, it's out of the debt service fund, but is not out of this. So there are some other expenses related to parking that the parking fund is not even carrying right now. So just to be perfectly honest, this fund's already getting a little bit of help.
Real quick, and this is around the parking study piece. I just want folks, like, when we get to that, no one's using that new parking garage. So if we're going to be offering an hour free, it pretty much needs to be in that parking garage, like, right? Not on-street parking, right? It's like, no, push the traffic where we need it, and it's in there. So.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? All right, I'm going to hand it back to Christina to tell us what happens next.
Thank you. So we are going to take a small break right now. We have a few, we're going to do some technical stuff with our computers. And so we will take a 10-minute break. And so we'll be back here to talk about CIP.